Welcome back, TCS viewers. Chris Nichols here from the camera store, coming to you from the beautiful Shuswap Valley. As you can see, it's gorgeous back there. There's crickets chirping, the weather's amazing, and I'm not obligated to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. We're staying at the Shuswap Bed Breakfast. Beautiful house, fresh vegetables, pool, the kids are down there having a great time. I mean, it really is an amazing place to stay if you're out in this location. We had this program recently where you could get a brand new mirrorless camera, and if you wanted, you could get a big credit off of it by trading in an old junky SLR camera. And so we had all these broken cameras coming in and SLRs that weren't wanted, and I don't know, it just kind of struck a chord because a lot of these cameras, first off, I remember selling over a decade ago at the camera store and, you know, owning some of these cameras that came back myself that I've since gotten rid of. And it just started to kind of make me think about things. I've got a Nikon FE. Now this camera's a classic. It's as old as I am. And I've had it for over 20 years and I love it and I could never get rid of it because it has the same appeal to me now as it did back then. But then I started thinking about digital SLRs. I mean, I had a D200 and, you know, that's long gone. And we just kind of live in this day and age where the minute a new camera comes out, you want to buy it and just get rid of the old junk. You know, it's the computer era. We turn over everything so quickly. And we got this Canon Digital Rebel. I'm holding it right here. It came in as part of this trade-in program. Now, I remember selling this camera well over a decade ago, brand new at the camera store. And this was actually very unique because this was the first digital SLR that you could buy for under $1,000. It really brought digital SLRs to the masses. And we found this camera. It came in, I assumed it was broken. We popped a battery in there. We found a BP511 for it and we turned it on and it's still working. And we've got these ancient memory cards for it. We tried to get ones that were small enough to still work in the camera. And so I just decided, you know what, why not try an interesting experiment? I'm going to shoot this old Canon Digital Rebel out here in the Shuswap. I'm going to compare it against the most modern Digital Rebel, a T6i. I mean, right up there. Brand new sensor. And, you know, this is just an experiment not only in photography, but also in nostalgia. I want to see, you know, are these old cameras, these digital cameras really junk? Or do they still have appeal? Are they really lacking that much? Or is really the photography up here in the mind and not so much here in the camera? So join me on this trip here today and take you through it and shoot some photos on both cameras and just see, have things really changed that much in the last 12 years? All right, so we're a couple days into our vacation here now. I've had some time with the Canon Digital Rebel, the original, shot some shots. Have things really changed? I mean, overall feel, grip, icons, button placement is very, very usable and very similar to what we use today. Not really much has changed. Now, the Canon Digital Rebel does have a beautiful LCD screen, full color, just like we have today. Maybe a little on the small side, but it does have a backup LCD on top showing your aperture, your shutter speed, your ISO. We haven't had anything like that on a Canon Digital Rebel since until the T6S, so that's a big deal. That's something that you save for high-end cameras. In video mode, you might say, oh, well, that's of course going to be totally incomparable, and that's not true. The Canon Digital Rebel has the same video capabilities as the modern Nikon DF, which I will remind you is a very expensive full-frame SLR with one of the best sensors on the market. So I'm going to give that one a comparable as well. You know, overall, this is an SLR, and it really hasn't changed much in 12 years. Functional, still feels the same to me. All right, so high ISO performance. This is sadly one of the places where the Canon Digital Rebel is just going to get its butt kicked all over the place. One of the biggest changes in the last 12 years has been high ISO performance, and not just the quality, but how far we can push it. I mean, this review is coming out right at the same time that Canon has announced a brand new 4 million ISO camera. Can literally see in the dark. I mean, it's pretty incredible. Rebels can push 25,600 now. You've got full frame SLRs that can go 512,000. I mean, you guys get it. this camera sucks. And it doesn't just suck at 200 or 400 or 800 or 1600, it's still even kind of crappy at 100, all right? I mean, this has come a huge way in the last 12 years. But in defense of this lowly Canon Digital Rebel, let's remember, Sigma DP Merrills aren't really any better right now. All right, now the original Canon Digital Rebel was rocking 6 megapixels, which at the time was actually pretty impressive. And I can remember so far back, I was talking to journalists and they were shooting these hideous Frankenstein cameras, Nikon F5 bodies with Kodak digital backs, and they're shooting professional journalism at 1.3 megapixels. And, you know, we still suffer from this same megapixel push, this big race in the industry now. 50 megapixel, 60 megapixel cameras, you know, and it's still being sold to consumers that they need these high megapixel counts. But luckily, I think most people now are pretty wise to the fact that megapixels aren't everything. And they really just give you the ability to crop or get larger prints. And who even prints anymore? But still, I'd rather have a good long lens and 6 megapixels than have to zoom in on my phone at 20. I mean, you know, there's still no replacement for having the right frame and getting close. And remember that when you start cropping heavily, thinking that is your answer for everything, well, you're still not getting control over perspective, and any sort of issues like motion blur or softness will be magnified when you crop as well. So, you know, nowadays, 24 megapixels on the Canon T6i and T6s, I think it's a welcome change. I appreciate it. But do we need 50 megapixels? Do we need 60? In a lot of cases, 6 was plenty for the time and still comparable enough for today's work. All right, so that brings us to the overall speed, processing power, and just general operation of the camera. And you know, more than any of the other stuff that we're talking about in this video, this is the one that bugs me the most about the old camera and that I really appreciate about the new cameras, just the overall speed. Now, first off, the original Canon Digital Rebel was pretty typical of its era. It shot about 2.5 frames per second and only for about 4 pictures in a row. It was really quite limiting. Autofocusing points, you only have 7. I mean, you didn't have a lot of choice on where you're going to put your focusing point and tracking subjects. This camera didn't do a very good job of it. But the other big problems are just things like waiting for the playback. You know, you get a busy screen on this camera all the time. You're waiting, you're waiting, you're waiting. Just looking at photos, getting through menus. I forgot how slow it was. And I guess back in the day we were just patient because that's all we had. But nowadays using it, I'm just frustrated with it. Now, to be fair, the modern Canon Digital Rebels did take quite a while to get fairly sophisticated autofocusing arrays, but you look at something like the T6i and the T6s, they're very capable autofocusing cameras, you know, lots of points. So, you know, really for me, that was the biggest drawback of the old cameras and one of the biggest improvements. Just handling, speed, being able to think and then shoot and capture that without waiting for the camera to catch up. What's this, you ask? Well, it's either creme de menthe or absinthe. I'll let you guys decide if you think I'm one who drinks the former or the latter. So yes, megapixels are a nice improvement, but the big improvements that we've seen lately then have been dynamic range, getting that wider histogram, being able to capture light and dark at the same time. Now, I know a lot of people in the old school world are going to say, well, hey, slide film didn't have very good dynamic range and it was good enough. And it could be good in the right situation, but you really had to pick the right light, and you had to deal with getting blown out highlights or black shadows and being okay with that. Dynamic range is a great thing, and you got techniques like HDR, but that doesn't always suit the shot, right? You don't always have still subjects and a tripod with you, so having better dynamic range is great. Which brings us to the Canon Digital Rebel. It's terrible. You know, looking at the Digital Rebel files here, when you push the shadows, you just get this flat, gray, featureless kind of area. It's not nice. Look at the modern Digital Rebels, you know, the T6i, you can bring up shadows, you can pull down highlights, and it still looks natural. And no amount of modern software technology has really assisted that. Okay, so I know I've been a little bit silly throughout this video trying to make a Canon Digital Rebel still compare to its modern counterpart today. So, you know, from an enjoyment standpoint, I would say that the newer camera is definitely more fun to use, easier to use, less delay, less waiting, and of course, image quality aside, also these little innovations, these little bells and whistles that have happened over the last 12 years make a difference, you know. You see somebody come out with something like art filters or 3D focusing, you think, oh, that's a silly trend. It's just a ridiculous little marketing technique. But actually, over the years, all of these innovations, they amalgamate into a very, very enjoyable, usable product that we now take for granted. So I guess this starts to give us some answers to some big questions. I mean, the first thing that I would say that I've discovered is the SLR design. I think it's as good as it's gonna get. You know, I was gonna say it's done, but it's not done. You know, people are still rocking twin lens reflexes, we're still rocking rangefinders, compact point and shoots, but you know, we have a lot of different camera designs now, and I don't think the SLR is gonna get any better. There's just nothing that we can do with it. You know, Sony tried to do these electronic viewfinder SLRs. They didn't really take off that well. You know, Olympus tried to innovate by using a smaller sensor and even having the mirror open sideways instead of vertically, and that didn't really change anything either. I mean, the fact is the SLR is a great design, but is as good as it's gonna get. The only thing we can improve is sensor technology and speed and processing. So, you know, is the SLR dead? Absolutely not. But is the SLR dead as far as the preeminent tool for the majority of photographers? I think so. I mean, the fact is now the old moves away to the new, and we have all the capabilities in these small packages. I guess the last thing that it's going to bring me to then is the nostalgia of this camera. You know, are we still going to go out and shoot these? I started this video saying that I still go out and shoot my Nikon FE because film is still around. But am I going to go out and shoot the Canon Digital Rebel? Unfortunately not. I mean, the fact is we do live in a technological world nowadays, and innovation and design does have some huge advantages. So I'm still going to use one of these when I go with an SLR. I'm not going to use one of these. So out with the old. Check us out on Instagram, subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter. Let us know what you think about this whole old versus new world. We'd like to hear your thoughts, and we will see you soon.